Well, I'm Martin Brossman KI4CFS, and I've got here...
I'm Carl Davis. My amateur call is W8WZ.
Great to talk to you tonight, Carl, because I wanted to talk about appropriate conversations on amateur radio, because a lot of people are really in home, they're under stress from economic and everything else. And I just think it'd be a very good conversation because I was in the kitchen with this radio cooking, and I was so happy to get away from the news and social media rants that are going on. And I was actually connected to D-Star, which I don't expect. Usually it's great. And I just heard this kind of ongoing rant, attacking a political rant. It went on and on. First, I thought it might be, conservative and then progressive, but all I knew is it was annoying. It just went on. And I finally stopped and interjected, and I said, excuse me, but this is KI4CFS, and I really like to enjoy amateur radio without long political rants. Would you consider taking this to Facebook? And it was almost like a visceral response, like, no, I don't want this here. I want to just have a conversation with people around the world and talk about their families or life or equipment or something else. And that's what spurred this all.
Well, in amateur radio in the United States, at least, we kind of have a spectrum of what we talk about. And we can talk about so many things that it's probably easier to simply talk about the things we don't talk about and leave everything else on the table. So the things we don't talk about are on one side established in law. And so FCC Part 97 says that when we are communicating with a foreign station, a station outside of the United States, that we have got to limit our comments to those of a personal or technical nature. So that's what we have to do by law when we're talking with a foreign amateur. And of course, that's good operating practice at any time, really, but is required by law when we're talking with someone outside of the U.S. The FCC just the other day issued a reminder, kind of, that you cannot use amateur radio to commit a crime in the United States. I'm shocked that we need a reminder of that, but the FCC apparently thought we did. So obviously, we cannot use amateur radio to commit crimes such as the robbing of a bank or the overthrow of the government or any other sorts of criminal activities. So that's one side of solid boundaries of law. And then when we're getting down the spectrum a little more, if we're talking on a repeater, which most of my VHF, UHF work is all done on repeaters, the owners of the repeater have the right to control what sort of content they want set on their machines. And I'm a board member of the Raleigh Amateur Radio Society. We run several repeaters on VHF and UHF here in Raleigh. And other clubs around the country and other individuals around the country run many, many repeaters, and every owner gets to set their own boundaries. What we have said in RARS traditionally is that we would like people to avoid controversial topics. So arguing about politics or religion or, even a sports fanatic or some sort of, controversial, argumentative type of conversation is not what we want to have on our repeaters. We don't want people to have a blood boiling sort of get your Irish up, dander up sort of experience when you're on one of our repeaters. And so we ask people to avoid that. And traditionally in the amateur service, and I've been a ham for more than 25 years and can speak from my own experience. And if you read any of the old handbooks or operating manuals or licensing manuals, you'll read this too. Traditionally, amateurs talk about things that are pleasant and enjoyable, and we don't want to be off-putting or unwelcoming of others who might think differently than us. So we're going to talk about the things we have in common. We're not going to argue with somebody, even though the law in the United States would allow us as American hams, when we're talking with another American ham, to get into a heated political discussion. And if we're not on a repeater that prohibits it, we're not violating any rules. It's not good amateur practice as a general rule to engage in such conversation. good amateur practice would say that we'd want anybody to hear our conversation to feel welcoming and good. And I use oftentimes a reminder of there's no such thing as a private conversation in the amateur radio service. Everything we say has an audience. You and I might feel like we're just talking to each other, but we don't know who's listening. You know, there could be a station wagon full of nuns listening to us. There could be someone at home with his wife and children listening to us. You know, there's all sorts of audiences that we're not aware of when we're speaking over the airwaves. And we have to be cognizant of that. So the blue joke or the off-color humor or the coarse language that you and I might feel both comfortable with perhaps should be avoided on the amateur service, because we have to be cognizant of other people listening in, including children and other people who we want to be welcoming to. We're also always an ambassador for amateur radio. You never know when someone is turning on the ham radio and saying to their friend who might get her or his license, look at this cool hobby I've got. And that first impression of the words coming out of the speaker are going to be their first impression of their hobby. And so we wouldn't want to say anything over the airwaves that would not be welcoming and encouraging of those potential hams listening to us too. So those are the very few things we don't talk about, but that leaves wide open the door of the many things we do talk about in the amateur service. And some conversations are best left in person or over the telephone, or, you know, as you mentioned earlier, on social media or something like that, and not to the amateur service.
Yeah, I think that's the point I wanted to just bring up. Is it's not that someone's just trying to stifle what they're doing. It's just, this is the world listening to us. Prospects, hams listening to us, children listening to us, all types of people monitor. I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to over the years, because I've been a ham since about 2003 or 4. And I always ask, how'd you get into it? And many times they're listening through monitoring, and now there are apps where they can hear some of the ham radio, certainly the 2-meter 440 frequencies, and so they're judging it. We've gotten a lot of people from the scanner community come in, that's why I want to have this discussion, because this isn't a I'm trying to control what you say conversation. This is about just think of something other than yourself and the person you're talking to. And one other point I thought of is, you know, we're often not just a repeater, but we're often a guest on a tower. And let's say I'm a public service tower and somebody's going on some wild political rant over that, and they bring it to the people where we're the guest on the tower. Well, if I owned the tower, I'd be going, maybe I shouldn't have these people in my property. So there's other ramifications of this. And just like being a good citizen, you think about your consequences. It's not you don't take action. You think about your consequences. And one of the things I love about amateur radio is there is a barrier to entry. Somebody in one of the Facebook groups said, I didn't know I had to be an engineer just to talk in the airways. And I got to take a chance and respond to him and said, you know, this is a field where we all had to go through the rites of passage of at least memorizing the questions and doing something to then earn a certificate and a license from the FCC in a body that is a commitment, at least, to monitoring itself, which generally creates an environment for a more civilized conversation. What I've learned since I've taught marketing and social media is when human beings have finite rules, they tend to be more civil. And when they don't have finite rules of engagement, they tend to be more non-civil. So I think this is an important thing to support right now and understand, and that's why I want to have it. In fact, I think they're in there a quote of something like conversations of non-significance importance or something in the legal.
Yeah, the Part 97 that refers to that says that governs our communications with amateurs in foreign countries, and it says something like remarks of a technical or personal nature.
Right.
And that's a good guidance for all of our communications. It's codified for our work with foreigners. And of course, that's for their own protection too. We might be talking to someone in a very oppressive regime, And you and I might love to talk about the evils of communism, but if we're talking to somebody who's in a communist dictatorship, we could get them in serious trouble by, when I'm talking with my colleagues in Cuba, I'm going to say, what kind of radio are you using?
Right.
I'm using, a Johnson Viking, or I'm using the ICOM 737 or whatever I'm using. I'm running 100 watts into a dipole up 70 feet. What are, and you're 579 here in Raleigh. That's what we're going to talk about with those folks. And that's for they're safe doing that. But that's a good practice, even when we're talking to other Americans as well. It's easy for me and you, if we talk and we agree on a topic, to kind of, echo chamber. And we don't realize maybe that we're being very exclusive to people who think differently than us. And as a board member of RARS, we're a very large club. We're the largest in North Carolina. We have more than 400 members. When you figure a club that large, we have conservatives and liberals. We have people of all different religious beliefs or non-beliefs, and they're all equally members of RARS. It's all equally their repeater. And so what we don't want to have happen is a group having a conversation on the repeater that is so one-sided or siloed or biased that people who disagree feel like they're not welcome. We want to really keep a spirit of openness and inclusivity on our RARS repeaters, because they're equally open to all our members, regardless of their very wide array of opinions on topics. And so the best way for us to do that is to not talk about the divisive things, but to talk about the things we do have in common, to talk about what we did today, to talk about our radios, to talk about what we've got going on in our lives, to talk about the events that are happening that we're engaged in our communities or in our families. Pretty much almost anything except something that is so controversial or heated that it would be off-putting to someone else who disagreed, because we want to have a community where we're welcoming and supportive of each other.
I agree entirely, and that's why I wanted to just have this conversation and invite other people. It's not about suppressing someone. It's about we actually have a chance to connect at a very authentic and human level when we get out of those bias that we all have and get out of that world. I mean, you and I might build a better relationship talking about a radio than our political views.
That's right.
Find out we have more things in common as human beings, and we're worried about our kids being safe and our health, and opportunities for our family. And these are human conditions that, in my experience of travel, everyone has. Wherever I've gone, had the chance to go several places in the world. And when you get down and slow down and talk and translate, what are they concerned about? Their family, their health, opportunities that exist, and taking care of people. And that's also why it's so wonderful that amateur radio has that area of assumed community service. I remember taking my neighbors out and say, you see those antennas on top of my house? You know what that means? They said, no, that means I have an obligation in a disaster to be a resource to all of you. To provide a service of communication if something breaks down, to help out, to not be a problem in it, but be a contribution to it. And it really changed their perspective, and they all know it. And if you have any questions, ask. If you hear something funny and wonder what it is, please come talk to me. I'll answer any honest questions with it. So it built it as that. Not many hobbies have that, where they have a barrier to entry. They have something earned, so you actually earn it. They have a huge variety of activities to lifelong learning, and they have a commitment to be of service to their community in the event of an emergency. And that's why I think it's also important that as we speak, we're also a contribution to our community, because nobody's gone, oh, I heard John's opinion on social media or on airways, I'm going to change my political position completely. It doesn't happen, folks, no matter what you think.
Yeah. And the other point, we're the amateur service, right? We're not the broadcast service. Right. We have different fundamental reasons for existing. And so we, even though we can talk about a wide array of topics, our goal is two-way communication, not entertainment. We're not here to run the Carl Davis political talk show on 2 meters, like I could if I had
right, a TV show or a radio show.
Limbaugh in the amateur service here, we're not trying to populate ideas. We're not trying to provide entertainment or news or that sort of thing. It's two-way interactive communication. So we're not trying to run our own broadcast stations here either. Very different services. Broadcasting is illegal in the amateur service for a reason. We're charged for different purposes.
Well, excellent. Well, what would you share a little bit about your passion and the club and what you're involved in? And I'll put some links for RARS, because I'm also a member of RARS. I'm a member of several of the groups, the clubs in the area, and I'll put that in the area below and some links for people to learn more. So anything you'd like to just close with? And this was terrific. This is what I wanted to have, is just this conversation for both hams and for the rest of the world to know our commitment.
Very good. Well, Martin, thank you for letting me be with you today. The group I mentioned is the Raleigh Amateur Radio Society. I am a past president and still a board member. I'm an education director for RARS, and we are the largest club in North Carolina. As the name would say, we're in the Raleigh area. And anybody can check out our webpage, rars.org. There's a lot of really great resources there for amateur radio in general, and specific if you live in the Raleigh area. Beyond that, in ham radio, I'm mostly active on HF and mostly in CW. As you can see from over my shoulder, I like a lot of vintage gear. I've got a little bit of a museum here. I have a transmitter from every decade from the 1920s till present, all functional, and I keep them all running. I just repaired a Drake TR4CW today and got that back up and running. So but I also like the new stuff. SDR is great. I love old and new technology. Mostly run CW. These active in traffic nets with the National Traffic System. These days, most of my activity is with regards to contesting, mostly CW contesting. Member of CW Operators Club, CW Ops, and the Long Island CW Club, and several others. And enjoy the hobby very much. Been in it since I was a kid. I'm 40. I'll be 42 next month. I've been licensed since I was 15. So the majority of my life has been, ham radio has been a part of it. So I love the hobby very much. Some of my best friends I've met through ham radio, and I say ham radio is a hobby that can easily be a lifestyle. And it's a way to stay connected with other people and make friends. I don't have any formal training as an engineer. Professionally, I'm a fundraiser. My training is in nonprofit administration and theology by formal training. And yet here I am with my ham radio station because friends have helped me learn. Guys who were engineers walked me through how to get my novice, my technician, my general, my advanced, my extra. All of the stuff I've learned, the transmitters I've built, there's a homebrew one there. I learned all that from peers teaching me, from reading books and lately YouTube videos and things like that, but from other hams teaching me, and then I help them. We learn peer to peer in this hobby. And I've benefited greatly from the generosity of people who are more learned than me on the technology to teach me what little I know. So I love the hobby. It's great. I appreciate what you're doing with it, especially to help newer people get settled and figure out how to get active and get on the air and talk to people. I want to do all I can to help new people overcome those obstacles and be able to enjoy this hobby the same way that I've been able to enjoy it. And part of that is being welcoming and encouraging of new folks and helping them overcome the obstacles that they have of how do I get on the air? How do I operate an antenna? How do I put up an antenna? How do I operate a radio? Who do I talk to? All of those things. I think those of us who have been in the hobby and benefited from it for years have an obligation to help those who are just coming in to be able to have the same kind of good experience that we did that have kept us here all these years.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, thanks so much for your time. This was terrific. And I'll sign with, this is Martin KI4CFS and
Carl W8WZ 73. Thank you.